One of the most difficult things about following Jesus can be that sometimes in your life, you find yourself in a season or in some circumstances that you really wish God would change. Maybe it's a relationship status, or maybe it's an illness or a sickness or a disease, or maybe it's just some chronic pain, or maybe it's a temptation, or maybe it's a prodigal child, maybe it's wanting to advance where you work, maybe it's wanting to work. But there will be times in your life when you find yourself in some circumstances and you really wish, you really want those circumstances to change. And so you'll pray about it. You'll ask God to change the circumstances. And sometimes He doesn't. Sometimes He won't. And when God doesn't change our circumstances, it's easy to assume, well, God is not paying attention to me. Or maybe God doesn't care about these circumstances. Or maybe, like many people, you think when you pray about something and God doesn't change your circumstances, maybe you're tempted to think, well, my faith must not be strong enough. If it was better, then God would change these circumstances. Or maybe I'm praying wrong. If I could figure out the right words to say, God would change this. Some of the greatest people in the Bible found themselves in seasons that they wanted God to change, and they prayed for God to change those circumstances, but He never did. Paul, he told us that he prayed 3 times, and he was just begging God to take away what he called his thorn in the flesh, probably some chronic pain or disease. And God said no. David, how many of David's songs start like this? How long, O Lord, must I wait? See, David was crowned or anointed king, but he had to wait. And while he was waiting, he waited for years on the run. He had to live in caves. He lived in hiding. He lived on the run because the current king, Saul, was trying to kill him. And David prayed over and over and over, how long am I going to be in these circumstances? Please change these circumstances, God. The scriptures are full of men and women who found themselves in difficult situations, tough circumstances, difficult seasons, and they prayed to God to change those circumstances, but God didn't. So what do we assume when that happens to us? I would suggest an alternative way of thinking. Not that God has forgotten about you because He couldn't if He wanted to. Not that God doesn't care. God cares about every detail of your life. It might not even be that your faith is wrong or that you're praying wrong. Maybe God doesn't change your circumstances because God is trying to use your circumstances to change you. That was certainly the case for David. It was definitely the case for Paul. Paul would say, the reason that God didn't take away my circumstances, my thorn in the flesh, was He was teaching me about His grace. And He wanted me to learn that even in the middle of pain, disease, that God's grace is enough for me. David, he had to learn patience. He had to learn to trust the people around him, and God used that circumstance of being on the run to change him. So maybe if you find yourself today in a situation that you have asked God to change, maybe you're single and you want to get married and you've asked God to change that and He hasn't. Maybe you're married and you want a child and you've asked God to give you one and He just hasn't yet. Maybe you've got a prodigal child and you've asked God to bring him home. Just hasn't. Or you've been fighting that illness for so long you don't think you can fight it anymore. And you've asked God and He just hasn't taken it away. Whatever circumstance you find yourself in and you've asked God to take it away, maybe God is attempting to use that circumstance to change you. So I would just suggest you embrace that. And it's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow that you need to change, and it's a hard pill to swallow that your circumstances are God's tools to change you. But they might be. And so the best thing you can do, if God seems to be saying, no, I'm not taking that away, or no, I'm not bringing that back, and no, I'm not giving that to you. The best thing you could do is say, God, show me how you need me to change. When you ask God to change you, He will begin the process. He will eventually change you. And when you are different, you see your circumstances differently. Maybe you'll see the circumstances in a different light, or maybe the lesson is over and God will change the circumstances. So my suggestion to you is ask God, what do you need to change in me? What is this season about? Show me, teach me, grow me, learn me, help me in this season. God has not forgotten you. He knows every detail of your life. Your faith is placed in the right person. It's in Jesus. You cannot fail. Your circumstances aren't changing. Maybe God's trying to change you. So hang in there and let him do his work. It's always for your best. See you later.